Allah to raise the rank of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and to protect the Muslim nation. I testify no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah, the one without any partner, the one without any equal, the one without any similar, the one who is unlike anything in the universe, and nothing in the universe is like him. He has no father, no mother, no sister, no brother, no son, and no daughter. He exists without time and place because he is the creator of time and place. He does not reside above the throne. He is not attributed with fatigue, like the Jews say. Our Lord is glorified beyond any imperfection that the non-Muslims attribute to him. Whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah Ta'ala does not resemble that. And whoever attributes an attribute of the creation, the son of Abdullah, the son of Abdul Muttalib, the son of Hashim, of Islamic knowledge, because having the sincere intention is a requirement to get the reward. So we are grateful to Allah that we have been guided toward Islam, because Islam is the greatest endowment, because Islam is the only true religion, it is the only valid religion, it is the only religion accepted by the Creator of the universe. And we are grateful and thankful to Allah that we have the knowledge of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, the saved group, which is the majority of those who identify as Muslim. So we're going to continue on with our subject matter, the explanation of the Matan of Abi Shuja', which is a beginner's book in the Shafi'i school of Islamic that pertains to the diya or the diya, which is the blood money. And we did mention some of that when we talked about the intentional killing and the accidental killing and the semi-intentional killing. Now going into more details about it, we got to page 459, top of the page. The author said, the intentional killing of a free Muslim requires paying 100 camels from 3 groups of camels. This is if the inheritors of the killed did not want the qisas and they wanted the diya instead. So we said if a Muslim kills another Muslim unjustly on purpose, yani he targeted that Muslim with something that is normally fatal. So in this case, what is it? It's called intentional murder. And so in this case, the inheritors of the victim, if they unanimously agree for the killer to be executed, then that's the judgment that is done. If not, they can choose to take the blood money instead, the diya. And so in that case, he has to pay 100 camels from 3 categories of camels, 3 groups of camels. The diya is divided into 3 groups. These 3 groups of camels are 30 hiqqa, 3-year-old female camels which reach the age of being mated, and 30 jatha'a, 4-year-old female camels which lost its front teeth, and 40 khalifa, pregnant camels, whose pregnancy is affirmed by 2 trustworthy experts in this field. It is not permissible that the diya include camels with a defect or camels that are sick, except with the permission of the recipient of the diya. In the case of killing intentionally, the killer himself is obligated to pay the diya, and it is paid immediately without delay. So there's no deferred payment for 1/3 for 1 year, 1/3, the second third for the second year, the third for the third year. So obviously, if the question is if the murderer tries to kill someone, he shoots them and they don't die, then he doesn't have to pay like the same type of blood money. If he did something to him that is you can get retribution for, like let's say he shot his ear off, so then the inheritors, they would decide amongst themselves how they would do it, but he wouldn't be executed and he wouldn't have to pay this blood money, this amount. When the killing of a free male Muslim was done by mistake, then the 100 camels are from 5 groups of camels. 20 bint makhad, 1-year-old female camel, whose mother would be pregnant. 20 bint laboon, 2-year-old female camel, whose mother would be nursing its sibling. 20 banu laboon, 2-year-old male camels, whose mother would be nursing its sibling. 20 hiqqa, 3-year-old female camels that reached the age of being mated. And 20 jadha'a, 4-year-old female camels which lost its front teeth. So if the killing was done by mistake, if it was purely accidental, then they have to pay this blood money of 100 camels from these 5 groups. If there are no camels, then the issue is transferred to their value. According to the new saying of Ash-Shafi'i, it was said that it is transferred to the amount of 1,000 golden coins or 12,000 silver coins. And this was the old saying of Ash-Shafi'i: if it were stiffened a heavy amount, then a third of the amount is added. So 1,000 golden coins. Let's see if we can do a calculation how much that would be in dollars. Thank you. So let's see here. The way that we're going to do the calculation is first that we're going to check the grams, see how many grams it is. So let's see. We're going to do a conversion because the amount that we have, the grammage that we have, that we got to start with, is for the minimum amount that one would be eligible to pay zakat. So that would be 20 gold coins. And so for the 24 carats, it would be about 3 ounces of 24 karat gold, approximately 84.875 grams. All right, let's see, how much is 1 gold coin? Is 4.24 grams of gold. Okay, so 4.24 grams of gold times 1,000. How much would that be? Let's do some math. Okay, oops. So that would be 4,240 grams of gold. Okay, so how much would that be in dollars? 4,240. Wow. So it comes out to a lot. So if 1 gold coin equals to approximately 4.24 grams of gold, so and times that 1,000, you get 4,240 grams of 24 karat gold, 99.999% pure. The total gold value of 4,240 grams of pure gold is $397,780.69. So that's the amount that the person would have to pay. MashaAllah, okay. The purely accidental killing by mistake is transformed from a light to a heavy amount of diya, meaning from the 5 camel categories to the 3 camel categories, which is more expensive in 3 cases. If the killing by mistake occurred in the haram of Mecca, whether the person was in the state of ihram or not, if the killing by mistake occurred in the Hurum months, the Hurum months were called that because it was forbidden for the Muslims to fight during those months, but this rule was later abrogated. The Prophet ﷺ received the revelation that he and his Muslim followers could fight the non-Muslims any time of the year. The Hurum months are Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, Muharram, and Rajab. So these months, basically, they have a special respect. And so the unjust murder that's done during that time, or the purely accidental killing that's done by mistake, instead of paying the light amount of the diya, they would pay the heavy amount. So instead of giving the 100 camels from the 5 groups, he would give the 100 camels from the 3 groups. The 30 hiqqa, the 30 jadha'a, and the 40 khalifa. If someone killed by mistake one of his rahim, mahram relatives, the mother of the wife is a mahram, but she is not a rahim mahram. The daughter of the paternal uncle is a rahim relative, but she is not a mahram. In these cases, the diya is not transformed from light to heavy. They remain at the light amount of the diya. So when they say a rahim mahram, they mean someone who is your relative, is your qareeb, or is your dhu rahim, but that's also a mahram. Because somebody could be your dhu rahim, but they won't be your mahram, like a cousin, for example. The daughter of the paternal uncle. So let's say you have an uncle and he has a daughter. That daughter is your cousin. She is dhu rahim, so you have to keep the ties of kinship, but she is not mahram because you could possibly marry her. The diya due for a free Muslim woman and the khuntha mushkil, the hermaphrodite that they are not sure which one is the original organ, is half of the blood money due for a man, whether it is a killing or an injury from an assault or an injury to the senses. The blood money for the intentional killing of a free Muslim woman is 50 camels, 15 hiqqa, 3-year-old female camels which reach the age of being mated, and 15 jadha'a, 4-year-old female camels which lost its front teeth, and 20 khalifa, pregnant camels. The blood money for the killing by mistake, purely accidental, are 5 groups of camels: 10 bint makhad, 1-year-old female camel; 10 bint laboon, 2-year-old female camel; 10 banu laboon, 2-year-old male camels; 10 hiqqa, 3-year-old female camels; and 10 jadha'a, 4-year-old female camels. The diya due for a dhimmi or a mu'ahad Jew or a Christian given aman is a third of the blood money due for a Muslim, meaning 1/3 of what the male Muslim receives for the males, or 1/3 of what the female Muslim receives for the females, whether it is a killing or an injury from an assault or an injury to the senses. And right now there is no dhimmi or mu'ahad. As for the Majusi, Persian fire worshippers, 2/3 of 1/10 of the diya due for a Muslim is due. This is the same as saying 2/3 times 1/10 equals 2/30, which equals to 1/15. So one can say 1/15 of the blood money due for a Muslim is due, or one can say 1/3 of 1/5 of the blood money due for a Muslim is due. 100 camels are due for cutting both hands from the wrist or for cutting both feet. However, if one hand was cut or one foot was cut, then 50 camels are due. If the 2 hands and 2 feet were cut, then 200 camels are due. 100 camels are due for cutting the nose, regardless of whether the person has the ability to smell or not, because the tool for smelling is not the nose. A person without a nose can still smell. The portion of the nose that is not hard consists of 3 parts: the 2 inlets and the barrier separating them in the middle. So for every part that is cut, one pays 1/3 of the diya. And so if someone were to mutilate another person by cutting off these parts, this is what they would have to pay. 100 camels are due for cutting off the ears or for ripping them off if it is without idah, exposing the bone. Because if the bone was exposed, if it was without idah, which is exposing the bone, if the bone was exposed, then one pays the arsh in addition to the 100 camels, which is 1/2 of the 10th of one's diya, which would be 5 camels for the free male Muslim. This is regardless of whether the victim was deaf or not. If the ears became hard, stiff because of the injury, the diya is 100 camels. When the ear becomes stiff, one loses the feeling, the sensation of the ears. So if, for example, a fly were to stand on his ears, he would be unaware of it to remove it. 100 camels are due for gouging out both eyes, and 1/2 of that for each eye, whether the victim was cross-eyed or not, and whether the person's eyes tear a lot because of a weakness in their sight or another reason. 100 camels are due for cutting off all 4 eyelids. For each one by itself, it would be 1/4 of the diya, 25 camels. If the eyelids became hard, stiff because of the injury, the diya would also be 100 camels. 100 camels are due for cutting off the tongue that does not belong to a mute person and that has sound, taste, senses. Whether it was the tongue of an old person or someone young, like a child. So the mute tongue is excluded. Something called hukuma applies. There is a diya for the one who loses their taste senses, even if the tongue was not cut off. There are 5 senses for taste: sweet, sour, bitter, salty, umami, savory. The diya is applied to all 5. So if one lost one of the 5, the diya would be 1/5 of the amount. And if one lost all of these 5 taste senses, then the full amount of the diya is due. When a head or face injury exposes the bone, idah, one can either ask for the qisas, which would be to replicate the injury on the aggressor, or to ask for the diya instead, which is 1/2 of 1/10 of the 100 camels for the free male Muslim, which is 5 camels. For knocking out a tooth, one pays 5 camels. For every useless organ, one must pay a hukuma, which is the amount of blood money proportional to the percentage of the depreciation of one's value had the person been a slave. So there are injuries or assaults that take place that they don't equal to the amount of the diya, and they don't have a set amount, so they're calculated in this way, through the hukuma way. So the person would be, let's say, estimated, if they were a slave and they had that type of, let's say, injury or wound, how much would that depreciate them as a slave? So if he was depreciated from being a slave at 15%, then that's the amount that he would pay, any of his value. Let's say he was valued at 10,000 and it depreciates him 15%, then 15% off that value would be taken. Now moving on to another section, which is swearing about a murder. And for these cases of the assaults, and just make sure you don't hurt or injure or physically attack another Muslim. Because let's say you might hit them in the head. You didn't think that you hit them so hard, but because of the place where you hit them, it causes them, let's say, to lose their taste. They can't taste any of the flavors. So now you have to pay the 100 camels. Because you took away their tastes. Same thing with any of the senses, like if you made them go blind. You hit them, and because of that head injury, they went blind. Now you have to pay the 100 camels. Now we're moving on to swearing about a murder. Reading from the top, the metin. If a claim of murder was associated with a strong clue that makes the self preponderate the truthfulness of the plaintiff would swear 50 times, and then he would deserve the blood money. If there was no strong clues, then the swearing is on the defendant. The one who killed someone whose bloodshedding was not lawful must fulfill an expiation. To free a Muslim slave without defects that hinder labor, if he does not find one, then one must fast for 2 consecutive months. The last section in the book of Jinayat is called Al-Qasama. This is the name for the oaths that are done by the inheritors of a killed person. This word is derived from qasam in Arabic, and it means the oath to swear. Qasama takes place when a person is killed, and one or more among the inheritors of the dead person accuse a specific person or several people of killing their relative. But there are no witnesses who witnessed the killing, nor did the killer confess to the killing, nor did the accused person confess to the killing. But there are certain signs that make the person tend to believe the accuser. So if those signs do not reach the level of religious proof, and there are no witnesses and no confessions, but there are signs that make the ruler tend to believe the accuser, in such a case, qasama takes place. For example, if a person was found killed next to a small village of people who are his enemies, and the accuser says those people killed him, there are signs there that make the ruler tend to believe the accuser. Enmity here means for religious or worldly reasons. Another example is if a lot of people were gathered around a water well to retrieve water, and when they disperse away from the well, a dead person is seen lying on the ground. In this case, the accuser makes 50 oaths. He swears by Allah 50 times that so-and-so or this group of people killed that dead person. He does not have to do them in one session. He can make the oaths in different sessions before the judge. If there is more than one inheritor, then the oaths are distributed among them in proportion to their share of inheritance. So if there were 2 accusers, and if one inherits half of the inheritance, and the other inherits the other half, then each of them makes 25 oaths. If some of the inheritors are away traveling, the rest of them make the oaths. Also, if some of the inheritors say they do not want to make those oaths, then the rest of the inheritors make the 50 oaths. In this case, by making qasama, the inheritors deserve to take the diya, and the accused person is not killed because there are no witnesses and he did not confess to doing it. But the accusers, the inheritors, deserve the diya. If a person is accused of killing another person without there being any signs, lawth, that make the ruler inclined to believe the claim, then in this case the accused person swears that he did not do what he is being accused of. The judge tells him that he is accused of such and such, and asks him to swear that he did not do it if he says he did not. If he swears that he did not do it, then that is it. According to the stronger saying, he swears 50 times. If a person kills another person whose blood is preserved, in this case, one needs to fulfill an expiation, a kaffara, whether he kills that person intentionally or intentional by mistake or by mistake. In all these cases, an expiation is due on him. This expiation is only due if one kills another person. So for cutting off the hand, the foot, or the like, there are no expiations due. For that expiation to be due, it is not a condition for the killer to be accountable. Hence, even if the killer is a little child or a crazy, insane person, the expiation is due from their own money. In this case, the guardian of the child or the insane person uses their money to set a slave free on their behalf. If they are not able, he does not fast on their behalf. If the child is at the age of mental discrimination and he fasts, this is valid. Also, for that expiation to be due, it is not a condition for the killer to be a free person. Even if the killer is a slave person, the expiation is due on him. Since the slave does not own anything, in this case, the expiation would be fulfilled by him fasting. And because the slave doesn't have any slaves, the slave doesn't have any assets by which he could buy a slave to free one, so he just fasts the 60 days. Didn't hear the last part. If they don't have it, they have to pay 1/3 of it, depending on the type of if they don't have the money. The question is, if they don't have the money to pay, it stays a debt on them until they get the money, and then they have to pay. And if not, then their inheritors pay for them after they die. The expiation is to free a Muslim slave, and this is by consensus. This slave must be free from defects that affect his or her ability to work in an apparent part of their body. So if the slave does not have hair on their head, it is valid to set such a slave free, because such a matter does not affect their ability to work. However, if his or her foot was cut off, then it would not be valid to set such a slave free, because that affects the ability to work in an apparent way. If one does not find a slave who fulfills the condition to set the slave free, or one finds such a slave but they are asking for a price much more than the market price, or if he cannot afford to buy such a slave, in this case, the killer must fast 2 consecutive lunar months. The killer must observe the order. So first he tries to set a slave free, but if he cannot for valid reasons, then he fasts. If he starts fasting the first day of Muharram, he continues his fasting until finishing the last day of Safar, regardless of whether one of the months was 29 days and the other was 30 days, or whether they were both 29 days or they were both 30 days. If they start fasting from the middle of Muharram and they continue until the end of Muharram and all of the month of Safar, then from Rabi'un al-Awwal they fast enough days to add up to the number of days they fasted in Muharram to equal 30 days. This is how they fast the expiation, even if Muharram was 29 days. As for the woman, the menses does not interrupt the consecutiveness of the 2 lunar months. So for example, if she starts fasting at the beginning of the month of Muharram, and she fasts 20 days, and then she has her menses for 7 days, then when it ends, she continues fasting into the month of Safar. Then if she has her menses for 7 days, then after her menses ends, she continues to fast Safar. And from the month of Rabi'un al-Awwal, she fasts enough days to add up to the number of days she fasted in Muharram for the total to be 30 days. And then at the end, she continues fasting until she makes up the days of her menses. So it's a very simple process actually. So let's say he started fasting on the 15th of Muharram. He fasts 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. And then the month ends. So how many days is that? 14 days. So then he fasts the whole next month, Safar. Let's say it was 30 days. So now he has fasted a total of 44 days. Right? 44 days. The 30 plus the 14. So now for the next month, Rabi'ul al-Awwal, how many days does he fast? Who's good at the mathematics? 16, alhamdulillah, mashallah. May Allah bless you. He fasted 16 because he has to fast enough days to add up to the number of days they fasted in Muharram to equal 30 days. So, and that's the case even if Muharram was 29 days. So the amount of days that he fasted from Muharram were 14 days because the month ended on the 29th day. And then from Safar, he fasted the whole 30 days. 30 plus 14 is 44. So now from this next month, Rabi'un al-Awwal, he has to fast the remainder of the days as if Muharram was 30, so which is 16. MashaAllah, okay. Alright, that covers the swearing for about a murder. Now we go into a new chapter called Chapter of Prescribed Punishments. So this chapter here is dealing with the specific punishments that were specified by the Islamic law for certain sins. So starting with the punishment for fornication, zina. The fornicator is of two types, muhsan and non-muhsan. Let's look at the footnote 371 for the definition of muhsan. The muhsan is someone who had sexual intercourse in a valid marriage among other conditions. It's very important to know, this helps us as Muslims when we are dealing with someone who is criticizing Islam, and of course they don't have any objective or moral grounds to criticize Islam. At the end of the day, it's just how they feel about it and their emotions and their whims and their desires, and it's not anything to do with objective proof or evidence. And basically, they can't criticize the stoning of a fornicator to death just because they think or they feel that this is not the way. Well, they're not God and they are not a prophet and they did not receive revelation. This is what God judged. And you see that this type of punishment, or that the religious punishments that are accompanied with some of the sins, you see that they are great deterrents. So nobody would, and it's going to come, but how is the way that someone would be convicted? First, they have to be a muhsan, which means that they had to have had sexual intercourse in a valid marriage before, and they would have to confess themselves. Like they go to the Muslim judge and they tell the Muslim judge, I fornicated, and they're required to give a detailed confession, meaning they have to say, for example, like the kuhul applicator being inserted into the applicator or into the bottle. They give an explicit description. They don't just say, I fornicated, because they might think they fornicated, in reality they didn't. So that's the one way to get convicted. The other way to get convicted is by 4 trustworthy male Muslim witnesses seeing with their eye the actual fornication. Not just seeing 2 people enter a house by themselves, not just walking into 2 people naked under a sheet. They have to actually witness the act. Without that, the person won't get stoned to death. And actually, it would be forbidden to accuse someone of fornication without evidence. For that one person to do it. It has to be the 4, like we mentioned. The prescribed punishment for the muhsan is to be stoned. The prescribed punishment for the non-muhsan is 100 lashes and exile to a shortening distance for 1 lunar year. The status of ihsan has 4 conditions: puberty, sanity, freedom, and the occurrence of intercourse in a valid marriage. The prescribed punishment for the male and female slave is half of that due for a free person. The ruling of sodomy and bestiality is the same as the ruling of fornication. Whoever committed unlawful sexual acts other than sexual intercourse would be punished with what the ruler sees fit, and this punishment must not reach the minimum of prescribed punishments. So for what is less than fornication, like let's say being alone together in a room with no third party, kissing, touching, hugging, fondling, everything besides intercourse, if they do get convicted of that, then the Muslim ruler, he punishes them in a way that he sees fit. But it cannot reach the minimum of an already prescribed punishment. Now for the explanation, the term hudud, which is the plural of hadd, refers to the punishments which are well defined by the rules of the religion. They are prescribed punishments to prevent the people from committing the sins that if done, the person deserves this prescribed hadd. So these are deterrents. These are actual real deterrents. The author, Abu Shuja', started by talking about the punishment of zina. In all the sets of laws revealed to the different messengers, zina was prohibited. It is not permissible in any revealed law. It is among the most enormous sins. In Sahih Muslim, it is narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said what means, the most enormous sin after blasphemy and killing unrightfully is zina. So zina is the third biggest sin. There are certain conditions that need to be present for the one who commits zina to be punished. This person has to be 1, accountable, 2, a clear male, that is, known to be a male, who 3, introduces the tip of, 4, his original connected penis or an equal part of the original 5 connected penis in the tip, if the tip part, which is called hashafa in Arabic, was cut off into the vagina, of a 6 female known to be a female, while 7, this joining is prohibited for itself as far as it is joining and not for another associated matter, and 8, without having any ambiguity that prevents punishing such a person, while 9, this female is usually desired by the one who has a sane nature, and while she is a human being and alive. There are the conditions that need to be present for the one who commits zina to be punished. So we're going to go through each one. The first one is to be accountable. So by saying the accountable person, we're excluding the non-pubescent child and the crazy person. So if someone's not pubescent and they fornicate, they don't get stoned to death. If they commit zina, they are not punished by the prescribed punishment in the religion, which is the hadd. And they don't get exiled or lashed either. By saying a person known to be a male, we are excluding the hermaphrodite who is not known yet whether this person is a female or a male. So sometimes the human being, although it's very rare, is born with both a penis and a vagina. But usually when that happens, the individual who's born like that, they are sure about which gender they are. So they're sure that one of the 2 organs that they have is an extra one. It's not the original one. So for example, like they get their period and they urinate out of the vagina, so then they know that that's the original, so they're judged as female. Now there is a certain also rare case where the hermaphrodite can't tell. So they're confused, or they're just, they don't know which one it is. So in this case there's a certain process to determine that, but until that is determined, if they commit zina, then they don't get the punishment. If they fornicate, they don't get the punishment. It says, if such a person introduces the penis in the vagina, this person is not punished by the hadd, the prescribed punishment, because there is a possibility for this hermaphrodite to be a female, and the organ she introduced would be an extra organ like the finger. In this case, the hadd punishment is not carried out. And because of that possibility, then they're not charged with the prescribed punishment. Number 3, by saying to introduce the tip part of the penis, the hashafa, we are excluding the case of introducing a part of this tip, meaning a part of the hashafa, because in that case the hadd is not carried out. So Islamically, it's very precise to where at what point in time is it considered that the fornication has occurred. And it would be considered when the whole head of the penis enters. So if it's just a part of it, so the whole head of the penis has not entered, so it's not judged as fornication yet. By saying his original penis, we are excluding the case when a person has more than one penis, because there is the possibility that the one joining the vagina was not the original one. So it's through a deformity or a rare medical condition, it's possible the person has like an extra part. So in this case, if he had an extra penis, then that extra one, he would not be punished, the prescribed punishment for that one. It has to be the original one. By saying the connected organ, we are excluding introducing a cut off organ. If his organ was cut off and then it was introduced into the vagina, there is no prescribed punishment in that. By saying a person known to be a female, we are excluding again the hermaphrodite, because if a male introduces his penis in the vagina of a hermaphrodite, there is a possibility that this hermaphrodite is truly a male, and the vagina would be considered an extra organ and not the original one. So due to this possibility, the hadd is not carried out. So because these religious punishments and many laws in Islam, and not just related to the punishments, but also related to purification or to prayer or to judging something as filthy, if there is a doubt about it, and if there is a doubt about the situation of that thing, then it's not judged, let's say, to be filthy. Like if someone is doubting, did some filth touch this carpet? They judge that no filth touched this carpet. If the person was on wudu, if the last thing that the person remembers is that they had made wudu, and then afterwards they doubt, did I break my wudu? Did I pass gas? Did I use the bathroom? Did I, etc.? Then they don't judge that they broke their wudu. They judge that their wudu is still on. Because that doubt does not have the ability to remove the certainty of the previous circumstance. So even though he's doubting within himself, even though himself he's not sure, but that doubt doesn't remove the certainty of his previous circumstance. So he judges by his previous circumstance. So here, if it's a hermaphrodite that they're confused, they don't know if which one is the extra organ. If they get penetrated in their vagina, they would not, the prescribed punishment would not be carried out, because there's a possibility that that's the extra one. By saying prohibited for itself, that is the act of introducing the penis, which are excluding when having sexual intercourse is prohibited for another reason, like when the wife has her menses. If the husband has sexual intercourse with her, in this case, the prohibition is because she is in her menses. Hence, this is not considered zina, and the hadd is not carried out, the prescribed punishment. So this condition here, it means that when the penetration is forbidden in and of itself, not that originally it's halal, but because of an external factor, it's forbidden in this instance. Like in the case when the wife, she's on her period, it's forbidden for the husband to have intercourse with his wife while she's on her period. So if he does it, even though that he commits a sin by this penetration, but the reason he's sinful is not because of the penetration itself, rather it's because she's on her period. If it weren't for that, he would be allowed because it's his wife, so it would be halal. So originally it's halal, but because of an external factor, in this instance it would be forbidden. So in this case, we don't say he gets the punishment of fornication. By saying without any confusion or ambiguity that prevents the hadd from being carried out, we are excluding the case when a person has sexual intercourse after having a marriage contract with a female, but without her guardian making the contract, that is, by her marrying herself to the husband. In this case, this is not considered zina, and no hadd is carried out, because that's the Shafi'i school.
Daddy, can I play with the airplane?
That's because according to Imam Shafi'i radiyallahu anhu, he doesn't consider that the marriage contract is valid without a guardian. So the guardian has to give her away in marriage. So if she were to get married according to Imam Abu Hanifa without a guardian, the Shafi'is, they say we don't consider this marriage, but they also say we don't consider it fornication. So according to a Shafi'i, the two people who are married with, according to Abu Hanifa, they don't get the prescribed punishment according to a Shafi'i. Because although in the Shafi'i school this is an invalid marriage, however, it is valid in the Hanafi school, and because it is valid in the Hanafi school, the Shafi'i judge does not consider it zina. Hence, he does not order for the hadd to be carried out. Likewise, he is not punished with the hadd if he has sexual intercourse with a woman, thinking that she is his wife while truly she is not. In this case, he is not sinful, and there is a certain ambiguity that prevents the hadd from being carried out. So also, the case of the ambiguity, and this might still happen today, but obviously less often than it would have happened in the past, because in the past there weren't any sources of light as abundantly as there is now.
Daddy, could you throw toys in the ground?
Tell him to stop. So sometimes it would happen that.
Why did Sophie tell on me? Okay, then.
Sometimes the person, and he would have, let's say, guests sleeping at his house, and if for some mishap or some mistake, the person ends up having intercourse with someone who's not his wife because it's dark and he can't tell, etc. So if that did happen, this person obviously, they would not get the punishment for the fornication because there's an ambiguity there. No.
What if someone's I know drugs and alcohol is not bad, but if someone's under an influence, like opioids, and they do that, is that ambiguity?
Opioids?
Yeah, stuff that can mess with the mind.
As long as let's see, I think we did mention this before. I'll double check, because in the case where the person, they consume something that makes them lose their mind, while knowing, they know what they're consuming, they didn't drink it by mistake. If they consume something that makes them lose their mind on purpose, and they consumed it on purpose, knowing what it is, and then it caused them to end up losing their mind, in certain judgments, the punishment is still applied, even though they are out of their minds. So I will need to check in this case. Number 9, by saying with a female desired by the one who has a sound nature, we are excluding by that having sexual intercourse with an animal or a dead woman, although it is prohibited and sinful, but no prescribed punishment is carried out. The one who commits zina falls under one of two categories that dictate the type of punishment one would be punished with. This person is either a muhsan or a non-muhsan, and so this person would be committing either adultery or fornication, and the punishment is different for each type. The muhsan person who commits adultery, whether they are male or female, they are punished by being stoned to death by using mid-sized stones. And the one who carries out the punishment is the ruler. It is the job of the ruler. This punishment is established by consensus. The Prophet ﷺ ordered the stoning of two people for committing adultery. One of them was a male and the other was a female. The verse which means, if the male and female commit adultery, then stone both of them, the recitation of this verse became abrogated. That is, Allah revealed to the Prophet ﷺ not to consider this verse part of the Quran anymore, but its judgment remained. And when you get into the science of hadith and the science of the fundamentals of the Islamic law, and you get into these topics, into these categories, like abrogation. So sometimes for the verses of the Quran, it's a verse that is still recited as part of Quran, meaning you still get the minimum 10 good deed reward per letter, and it's still there in the book of the Quran, but the judgment would have been abrogated. So Allah would have revealed another ayah or a hadith that would lift or elevate the implementation of that first judgment, and now this second judgment is to be implemented. And sometimes it occurs that a verse of the Quran would be abrogated from recitation, meaning it's no longer recited as Quran, but its judgment still remains. So one example of that is the ayah of fornication. The non-muhsan who commits fornication, whether they are male or female, they are punished by being whipped 100 lashes in a consecutive way, that is, without interrupting the whipping for a period of time where the pain stops, and by being exiled at a distance of qasr, at least, from the town where he committed the fornication. If, for example, 50 or more lashes were carried out, and then the whipping was interrupted, he would be whipped the rest up to the 100, and they would not start from the beginning. It is not a condition for the fornicator to be whipped first and then exiled. Both must be done. It is permissible to exile him or her first and then to whip him or her. The ruler would tell the person to go to such and such town. When the ruler tells this person to leave the town and go to another town, there is a certain humiliation in that. What is sought by exiling him or her is to let the person feel lonely by being away from their family and hometown. The ruler might order the fornicator to be exiled to a distance more than the distance of qasr. Our master Umar exiled someone from Hijaz to Ash-Sham, which is more than the distance of qasr. If the person fornicates and is punished with 100 lashes, and then they commit zina again, they are punished again with another 100 lashes. There are certain conditions that need to be present for one to be considered muhsan. These conditions are 4. Puberty. Number 1, puberty. If the non-pubescent child has sexual intercourse, they would not be considered muhsan, and they are not punished with the prescribed punishment, hadd. Number 2, sanity. If a person commits zina, he is not punished with the hadd for that. If a crazy person commits zina, he is not punished with the hadd for that. However, the ruler punishes him with a certain punishment he chooses, ta'zir, that stops him from repeating such an act. If a crazy, insane person has sexual intercourse for the first time with his wife while he is insane, he is not considered muhsan by that. So after that, if this insane person becomes sane and does not have sexual intercourse with his wife after being sane, then if he commits zina, he is not punished by being stoned to death, because when he had the sexual intercourse with his wife, he was not accountable. Also, if someone is married and has sexual intercourse with his wife, and later this person becomes crazy, and while being crazy he commits zina, he is not punished by being stoned to death. Number 3, freedom. A male or female slave is never considered muhsan. So if a slave commits zina, he is punished by being whipped and exiled, and they are never stoned, and they are punished with half of the punishment of the free person. So whether they are male or female, they are punished by being whipped 50 lashes in a consecutive way, that is, without interrupting the whipping for a period of time where the pain stops, and to be exiled a distance of qasr, at least from the town where he committed the act. Having had sexual intercourse in a valid marriage contract. Number 4. So if a person does not have a sexual intercourse while having a correct marriage contract, then this person is still not considered muhsan. If he commits zina, he is punished like the person who was never married. However, if this person had a prohibited sexual intercourse with his wife, like to have sexual intercourse while she is menstruating, but while having a valid marriage contract, he becomes muhsan, and therefore if he commits zina, whether while still being married to his wife or after divorcing his wife or after the death of his wife, in all these cases he is stoned to death because he satisfied his desire in a valid marriage contract. If a woman fornicates and as a result she is exiled, they do not exile her by herself. Rather, they send her husband or a mahram with her, like her brother, because it is not permissible for her to travel by herself without a mahram. If the husband or the male mahram does not want to go with her, even if it is for a fee, they are not forced to go. In this case, they delay her going into exile until they manage this issue. If a slave commits zina and this slave is accountable, then his or her punishment is half of the punishment of the free person, which is 50 lashes, and to be exiled for half of a year. And we'll stop there. What's coming up in this chapter is to religiously how to confirm that somebody commits zina. And so this is very important because the enemies of Islam, they like to criticize the Islamic law when they have no grounds to do that. These punishments, these prescribed punishments, they're there as a deterrent. The person, if they never get convicted of zina, the religion does not encourage them to confess. The religion encourages them to repent and never to do it again. But if they are convicted through the 4 upright, male, trustworthy Muslim testimony, then the punishment is carried out. And that's something very difficult to happen. Yani for there to be 4 trustworthy, upright male Muslims, pubescent, that witness this act, it's very difficult for that. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. After the chapter of the punishment for fornication, which is, it's a couple pages left. After that is the punishment for accusing a person of fornication, adultery. And then the punishment for drinking alcohol, and then the punishment for theft, then the punishment for waylaying, and then some other things. And we're getting through, inshallah, till the end. Once we get to the end, then we can go back to the dealings and transactions. We could do marriage and divorce and khula and postmarital waiting period and those chapters. If there are no questions, we'll conclude. Yeah. For the fornication? There is a part that's going to mention that, and the same rules apply in terms of conviction and punishment. Since they're subjects of the Islamic government, they have to, and these rules would apply to them. طيب, any others? طيب, نهلل لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات بارك الله فيكم. السلام عليكم.
Can I say?
Yes, Habibi, you can say.
Can I say abatasi?
Abatasi.
Atasi oi.
Alif ba ta tha jim ha kha. Go ahead, take it. Take the whole thing. Ow. Yeah. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Lillah. Alright, Habibi. Good job.
Okay. I say about that. About that.